Well, and now we are joined from Washington, D.C. by Asia One correspondent Jagruti Dave. Thank you so much for joining us here on Asia One. Well, Jagruti, what are you hearing from your sources in Washington about the talks with Iran right now?
Well, Washington is very publicly from the president to US officials saying that they're open to the talks continuing. But you do have Iran rejecting the possibility of talks without any kind of agreement on who controls the Strait of Hormuz. And there is really the point of contention between the two sides. Iran is claiming that it is in charge and the US is rejecting this. And Donald Trump, as you mentioned, is saying that Hormuz is open to commercial traffic despite both sides trading strikes, and this was in an interview with NBC. And CENTCOM, the US Central Command, is rejecting the Iranian assessment that it controls the strait. It says the Strait of Hormuz is open to all vessels seeking to lawfully transit the international waterway. Now, the question is really how can both sides come to a resolution on the Strait of Hormuz, which is a crucial shipping waterway controlling around 20% of global oil trade, as well as the supply of fertilizers. And this has effectively come to a standstill, especially compared to pre-war levels, despite Washington's assertion that the strait is open for use. Iran is threatening to restrict traffic there. And so there are real concerns about both the safety and the supply of oil to the global markets as a result of these strikes that both Iran and the US are trading with each other.
And look, is anyone on Capitol Hill talking about new sanctions or a new deal with Iran so far now?
Well, the Treasury, for one thing, has already waived sanctions relief on Iranian oil. This was part of the memorandum of understanding that alongside the strikes on on Iranian military targets, that was an act that the United States Treasury had gone through with. But Congress has for a long time been looking at sanctions for Iran. You do have the hawks on Capitol Hill, who were very unhappy with the memorandum of understanding, which waived those oil sanctions. So they will clearly be relieved to see that the Treasury has once again imposed sanctions on Iranian oil, because they worry about the national security implications of money flowing back into Iranian coffers. But there are other legislation that's already been in place as well, already going through Congress, I should say, working its way through, or at least put in legislative form onto the Senate floor to debate. And that is along the lines of giving Congress greater oversight on whether the executive, that is the president, can waive or impose sanctions on countries like Iran. So Iran and sanctions relief is a long-running conversation that's been happening on Capitol Hill.
Also here, what's the mood in the Pentagon? Are they moving more to troops or ships to the Gulf after closure of Strait of Hormuz?
Well, currently there are around 50,000 troops stationed in the Middle East. That's approximately 10,000 more than the average baseline that the US has, which is around 40,000 troops. Now, this increase happened, I think, around in March of increasing the number of troops to the region. And this was amid speculation that there could be a wider ground invasion. But I think experts were countering this, saying that actually the 50,000 is not enough really to conduct a mass operation on the ground in Iran. You need, if you look at comparative ground operations, there are hundreds of thousands of troops that are often deployed for more comprehensive ground operations. So that number still stands, 50,000 in the Middle East. And if you look at what CENTCOM is saying about operations, you know, you've seen the latest third round of strikes, 140 Iranian targets struck using drones, using missiles. There are around 20 naval vessels that are operating in more than 20 US Navy warships patrolling waters across the Middle East. That's what CENTCOM's saying, as their forces continue promoting regional security and stability. Washington has always said publicly that it is ready to escalate, but crucially, the president himself has said that negotiations will continue. So there is a real sense that from Washington that there is a need for the diplomatic process to progress and to succeed.
And well, Jagruti, do you think Washington actually takes Qatar and Pakistan mediation seriously, or do you think there is like more sort of skeptical approach to that?
I think Washington is very much reliant on Qatar and Pakistan for their mediation efforts. They have access to both sides. They have a good relationship with both the US and with Iran. So I think their role is crucial, mediation efforts going forward and the mediation efforts that have taken place so far. So I think if Washington is serious about diplomacy, then they have to be serious about the efforts undertaken by Qatar and Pakistan. Now, as I say, Donald Trump has said the negotiators will continue, even though he said that he thinks that it's a waste of time. Now, you could argue that, again, this is a strategic ploy by the president to demonstrate, well, he doesn't care how it goes. They've won. He thinks the US has won either way. He is ready to launch a wider military operation if negotiations don't succeed. And that is a pressure exercise by the United States, arguably. The fact is that Donald Trump has said that he believes that the strikes are not going to result in a long-term war. And I think behind the scenes, you listen to what diplomats are saying, you read sort of analysis of the situation. There is a real sense on both sides, for both Iran and the United States, domestically and on an international level. There is a sense that both sides want the Memorandum of Understanding to succeed and for a longer-term peace to play out, and that is both in their domestic interests and in the interests of the global community.
Right, Jagruti Dave, live from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us here on Asia One.